Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to my channel. It's True Crime with Jess. I'm here every Tuesday and Thursday at 8 p.m. Tuesdays are my request evening. Thursdays, the stories I like to bring to you. I'm also over on TikTok, which is JessRose5472. My Patreon is patreon.com/JessRose5472. Or if you'd just like to watch me, that'd be amazing. If you'd like to subscribe to the channel or even like the video at the end. That'd be amazing too. It really would. Or you could just watch any of the above. That'd be great. But now that I've done all of that, we're going to start this evening's story. It is a child, just to let you know. Perfectly understandable if you can't watch that content. I already understand that. But if you do want to stick around, I'm going to start now. So it's the horrific Darisabel Baez story. Okay? Now, I have warned you. But I'll warn you one more time. It's awful. It genuinely is. It's aren't they always? Aren't all? I find myself saying this a lot. But this one, it's just heartbreaking. Right, okay. So we have Darisabel Liana Baez, okay, born on the 5th of April 2006 in Philadelphia, which is Pennsylvania in the US. Her mum, Noida Elizabeth Baez, that's her mum. Her dad, having trouble finding him. I believe a name was given, but not too sure if that is Darisabel's dad. So I'm not going to say that name because I'm not too sure. So we're going to leave her dad because I'd hate to name somebody and it's not. So now, little Darisabel, her nickname is Dari. Okay, so that's what we're going to call her throughout the story. Okay. And when little Dari was born, she lived with Noida, her mum, and her parents, which would be Dari's grandparents, called Margarita Leone and Luis Leone. Okay. Now, Noida was still a teen when she had Dari. She was about 17, 18 years old. Okay, so she's quite young. So she's still living with her parents and stuff. Now, Dari, I'd love to tell you a lot about this little girl. And normally I do. At the beginning of any story that I tell you, I always give you just a little bit about them. I can't tell you much about this little girl. I don't know much about this little girl. I know she's adorable. Very, very cute little girl. I know she was doted on at the beginning of her life in the very early days. It was said that she was meeting all her milestones. But that's about it. And it's so sad. It's so sad. It just said she was very cute and she was, she was quite outgoing, but it's really, really sad that I can't tell you more about her. And you'll see why in a minute, okay? Because in November of 2007, now Dari's only 19 months at this point, Noida, who at this point is age 19, so her mum, 19, she begins a relationship with a man called Harvey Lamar Johnson. Okay, he's 26. Now, remember, Noida's only 19, he's 26. Apparently, Margarita and Lewis weren't too happy about that. I don't know if it was the age gap. I'll be all right, 19 and 26, they are different points in your life. Of course they are. But she's already got a child, so she would have had to have matured. So I don't know if that was the reason or it was simply, she's got this very young child that she needs to concentrate on. And maybe her parents were like, look, you haven't got time for a relationship with a new partner as well. I don't know, but they just weren't happy with this new relationship at all. Now, another reason they may have had for it could have something to do with that Harvey had left his wife and his 3 children for Noida. Okay, he walked out on them after 9 years. So that's how long he'd been married for, had 3 children, and fell for this 19-year-old girl and just see her. And it could be down to that as well. I would imagine it's not exactly what you want for your own daughter, is it? There's a few reasons, but basically they, I believe, gave her an ultimatum and she chose him. And so she ends up moving out with Dari out of the family home. Okay. So now Noida, Dari and Harvey, they move into an apartment shortly after this. Okay. And Noida then stops her mum and dad, Margarita and Louis, even seeing Dari then. She's like, right, okay. You didn't want us there, obviously, so you don't get to see your granddaughter either, which I thought, that's a bit much, but she is 19, and even though you would hope that having a child she would have matured, the signs of it, there was still a lot of growing up to do from Noida. So things didn't start great, okay? And Dari, she wasn't even given a bed at this new home with a man she doesn't really know. She's been taken out of the home she's known since she was born and the family she had around her, and now all of a sudden she's in a place she doesn't know and she hasn't even got a bed, okay? And what she actually has to sleep on are kind of blankets on the floor. That's it, okay? So we come to Saturday, the 5th of April, 2008, and this is Dari's 2nd birthday, okay? So I believe there was a slight get-together on a birthday, nothing major, okay? Then we get to Sunday, the 6th of April, 2008, so the next day, okay? And Dari wakes up. She wakes up about 6 o'clock in the morning, and it said that she'd had a bad dream. So she woke up. She was quite upset. At, she's just turned 2 the day before. So you can imagine she's had a bad dream. She wants a bit of comfort from her mum. And she goes in to where Noida and Harvey are in bed. And she tries to get a bit of affection from her mum. Not only does Noida not give her any, Harvey decides to basically slap her away and tells her to get out the room and go and stand in the corner where she's been told she has to go when she wakes up early. So instead of getting up with your child when she's woke up early, 5:30, 6 o'clock, perfectly normal time for a 2-year-old. I think we can all say that. No. If she wakes up at that time, she has to go and stand in a corner, even though she was woke up with a nightmare. So at 11:30, Harvey actually wakes up. Not Mum, not Noida, but Harvey, he wakes up. And he goes out to check on his car. Now, he doesn't come back till about 12:15. And when he comes in, Dari's crying, hysterically. And when he walks into this situation, Noida's just sort of there quite frustrated. Dari's really, really upset. And he asks Noida, he's like, look, what's happened? Noida's just quite frustrated. She doesn't really answer him. And he presumes it's the fact that Dari has climbed up on the stairs again, like she had a couple of days previous. So I don't know what made him jump to that conclusion, but he just assumes that that's what it is. So what he does, he smacks her on her backside for this supposed guess that she was on the stairs. He doesn't even know that's what it was. But when he smacks her bum, she's got a nappy on. And it would appear what Dari was actually crying for is this nappy, by the sounds of it, hadn't been changed. From the sound I'm getting, or from the impression I'm getting from what I found out, I would presume she wasn't even changed from when she woke up, because the nappy was so full of urine and feces, everything else. As he smacked her, the nappy has exploded. Now, I don't know if you've ever seen a nappy get split, but it's the messiest thing ever. Well, a wet nappy, should I say. It's messy. It's like a gel. It's like a hard gel crystallized type material. It's awful. It's horrible. And as he did that, it's burst and it's gone everywhere, along with everything else that was in her nappy. Okay? So, he's fuming. He's absolutely fuming, because obviously this is her fault. This is little Dari's fault. I wouldn't have even minded if he'd have looked at Nida at that point and been like, oh, so you were wondering why she was crying. Would it have anything to do? That wouldn't have surprised me, because you would be annoyed at that. You'd be like, that's why she's crying. She needed changing. But he doesn't. His anger goes to little Dari, and which is crazy to me. So, as he's cleaning her up, quite angrily, she poops again. She's 2. I don't know if it's nerves or she needed to go. I don't know how long her nappy was needing changing for. Maybe she just needed to go again. But she goes again while he's cleaning her up. He was livid. He was absolutely livid that this child had gone the toilet again. So then we get to 26 minutes past 2 that afternoon. Okay? A 911 call is made requesting an ambulance for an unresponsive Dari. Okay? So, I'm going to be naming, I don't normally do this with regards to the authorities that come out. I don't normally name them all, because although I do hear a lot of their names, if I don't need to name them with relation to the story, I wouldn't normally. But I will this time, because a lot of the information I'm bringing to you is from a documentary that was done. I believe it's only on YouTube. I could be wrong, but I believe it's only on YouTube, okay? And it's called Carrying Darisabel, okay? That's what the documentary is called. And it's a documentary from the point of view of all the authorities involved from here on out, okay? And it's heartbreaking to see from their point of view, because I think when I'm doing stories, whether they're adults or children, when I mention the ambulance staff or the paramedics or the police, they're just this sort of, it's just sort of this umbrella term, isn't it? You don't think about the individuals themselves, who it's their job, but they're no different to us. You know, they will have the same emotions. They will have to desensitize themselves, I've no doubt. Well, they would have to, but they are still human. And I think that's what this documentary showed. Now, Officer Roger Nestor, he arrived first on the scene, right? And as he walked into the hallway of the building, he bumps into Harvey, okay? And as he bumps into him, he appears to be texting on his phone. He's sort of heads down at that time, okay? And he sort of says to him, he's like, where do I need to go? And he sort of grunts at him, and he's like, look, where am I going? So he had to be quite firm with him. And he sort of gestures upstairs to him and then carries on back on his phone as he's walking out the door. This is Harvey, okay? So as Officer Roger Nesta gets up the stairs, he says he walks in to the house into the kitchen, okay? And he says he can see Noida, who he finds out is Noida, leaning over what he can obviously make out is an infant, all right, or well, a toddler, but who we can't properly see. It's quite dimly lit in the house, and he can see she's giving Dari CPR. Okay, now as Noida lifts herself up away from Dari, he says he just gets the shock of his life, a complete shock of his life. Because he says all he can describe what he could see was on this little girl was camouflage. That's what he described, what he was seeing. She was in such a bad way. He was in shock for that split second as he walked in. You can imagine the amount of things that officers and paramedics and everything see every day. For him to be in shock, it must have been horrific what he walked into. Now he says he looked at Noida straight away and says, what happened? And she says something about, she slipped in the bath. And he actually says, bullshit. What's happened to her? That's actually what he'd said to her. Just no time for it whatsoever. He could not believe what he was looking at. Now, like I say, the light in the apartment was very low. They also then have Officer Lisa Daniels and Andy Baez come in. And although his surname's Baez, he's no relation to anyone in the story. Okay, so when they come in as well, same reaction from them. And Andy Baez, when you see him on the documentary, you can see it affected all of them. You can see affected all of them, and not in the way of the words they use or, you know, the mannerisms. It's the emotion with which they talk. And they go quite quiet in the documentary. They go really quiet while they're talking about it. And, oh, it's just so sad. But all they could see is this child's just covered head to toe in bruises, okay? Now, Officer Daniels said she saw bleeding, fresh bruises. Officer Nesta, like I said, mentioned that it looked like camouflage. Now, Dari at this point is still unresponsive. Officer Daniels goes to give her mouth to mouth, okay? And she says that as she went to give mouth to mouth, all she could taste was blood coming from Dari's mouth. So her voice, what she says was, I didn't know that she must have been battered in the mouth. Oh, God. So that's what she was up against while trying to give her mouth to mouth. And as they're looking around, they can see spatters of blood all around this kitchen. And then where Dari had been sleeping in the living room, apparently, with these blankets that had just been thrown there and some clothes. There was blood on the clothes, there was blood on the blankets, there was clumps of hair around this apartment. Clumps of hair. What they also notice is blood on an Xbox controller. Okay. And Dari's got a hiking boot. It would have been such a small boot, but it's a hiking boot. Okay. There was blood on that. All right. Now, Noida, like I said, had tried to say that Dari had fell in the bath. As I said, Officer Nesta said, called bullshit on that. Then she tried to say she'd fell down the stairs. Basically saying this was an accident. She's trying to play this off as an accident. And these officers and then the paramedics are looking and like, they've never seen anything like this. So Officer Baez turned round and he just knows he wants to get this child out now. So he picks her up. Now, Dari was naked, hence the reason of the bath excuse, I believe. And as he's holding her, okay, as he's holding her and bringing her outside to rush her to the ambulance, he says that a crowd had appeared, just onlookers, obviously, seeing the police and the ambulance and everything else, and just being nosy, basically. But he says he was so conscious that this little girl had nothing on, and he just wanted her to have just some amount of dignity. He put her head into his chest and just tried to cover her as best as he could to put her on the gurney. And when he did, and it's light, then all her injuries began to really stand out. Because remember, I said it was quite dimly lit in the apartment, and they're all just gobsmacked at the amount of injuries on this tiny little girl. So upon arriving at the hospital, it was discovered that this little angel, she was brain dead. So, but she's put on life support, okay? So as she's rushed off in the ambulance, they're not willing to let Noida just go just yet, not with the excuse that she's made anyway. So they ask her to come down to the station with them. And one thing that was noticed, that I believe it was Officer, I think it was Lisa Daniels, turned around and says, she says not once did she ask about her daughter. Not once. Just spoke about herself and how upset she was and how bad this was for her. But she never asked about Dari. Not once. And she said that really upset her, because she'd just seen this child, the state she was in, and then to be talking to the mum and be very aware that this mum hasn't mentioned the child once, to say, it, you know, she was expecting her to say, look, we can talk about this after. I need to go to the hospital. You know, you can follow me down there. Ask me all the questions you want, but we've got to go. There was none of that. Didn't even ask about her. Oh, okay. So, as I said, she'd given 2 separate excuses, hadn't she, of what had happened. Now, Dari, when she was seen at the hospital, she was covered in bruises, lacerations, scars, head to toe. Okay. There was injuries to her head, her brain, her chest, her heart, her liver, her neck, her arms, her legs, and her genitals. Everyone could say she'd been tortured for a long time. Okay. Now, Harvey was quickly picked up. I've heard 2 things. The documentary, which I'd more go with, said that he'd gone over to his brother's. That's where he said he'd been. Do you remember I says when they walked in, he was on his phone, looked like he was texting, and then he walked out. Well, apparently he came back, said he'd been at his brother's, said he was feeling a bit faint. The officer who was there was like, come on, let's just get you checked out quickly. There was another thing that was said that actually was picked up at a laundrette somewhere. I'd more go with the documentary and say that he did come back. And what he said to the officer that was there was, I'm sorry, I did it. The officer was like, you did what? And he was like, I beat her yesterday pretty bad with a belt. And he's gone, I've been beating her. And he goes, I've been hitting her for the past 2 to 3 days. He said, but it was discipline. It was for her own good. It was just discipline. He says, Noida couldn't do it, although he calls Noida Elizabeth. that is her middle name, and that's what he was referring to her as. And he was like, Elizabeth's pregnant. So, you know, I don't know if that was his excuse for him picking up the discipline. But now, as for Noida being pregnant, I won't mention that again, because there's actually no proof that there was a baby, or, you know, whether she'd said that to him, whether he said it as an excuse, I don't know. But there's no sign that she was pregnant. I'll just say that. Okay, so at 9:13 p.m. that night, Harvey was arrested for aggravated assault and child endangerment. Now, Noida, after her bath story and her stairs story, she then said, look, it was him, but I was begging him to stop hitting her. So basically what had happened was, back to that morning, or that early afternoon, when Dari had pooped herself after he'd slapped out and exploded her nappy, okay? When she'd done that, Harvey had, remember I said he was livid. What he'd done, he dragged little Dari. She'd only turned 2 the day before. Just 2. She's tiny, okay? He dragged her into the bedroom. Now, Noida tried to say, and he locked the door. And I could hear he was hitting her because I could hear her crying, but I couldn't see. We found out that, yes, she could. He didn't lock the door at all. He didn't lock the door. She could see what he was doing. Apparently, he turned around and said she was saying, oh, you know, you should stop now. But she didn't try and stop him. And he was whipping Dari. Not with a belt. Do you remember I mentioned the Xbox controller? Well, it was with the Xbox cord. And he was actually whipping her with that. And Noida said she could hear the whip sound as it went through the air, over and over again. Now, Harvey's, as much as he was saying he did do it, he said he'd only do it like 7 to 8 times. 7 to 8 times. But it wasn't 7 to 8 times. But it was the fact that he said it like, oh, it was only, you know, it's only a few times, 7 to 8, you know, it wouldn't have done too much damage. He says, I was just trying to hit her arm. He said then he brought her into the bathroom to put her in the bath to try and clean her up, apparently. And then he'd left her in the bath. She's just turned 2. He leaves her in the bath to go and get a fresh baby grow for us, citing that, you know, we've just moved in and the stuff's not all unpacked yet, so I had to go up to the attic to find this baby grow. And when I came back, she was face down in the bath. Okay? He says, but when I got her out, I'd noticed she had a lump and a gash on her head, which was there when the paramedics came. I don't know if he was trying to say it was from the bath or he'd done it. I don't know, but he did say there was a lump and a gash. Noida also says the same thing. He says, and she was unresponsive. And then there's some sort of back and forth where apparently she did come back round. And then she went unconscious again. It's all very shady. It's hard to know what the real truth is, other than he tortured this child for nothing. For nothing. Not that there'd be any reason whatsoever, but I'm just saying it was for nothing. Okay? Okay. So after answering the questions put to her, Noida, she was out in the sort of waiting area of the police station, waiting to go home. She was waiting for a lift. Not to go home, to go back to the hospital. Apparently, even though she hadn't asked about Dari, they were thinking she's going to go to the hospital. But while she was waiting in the waiting area, a call came through to the police station from the investigators who were still back at the apartment. And they were like, don't let her go. They'd found a diary, a journal, which proved that she wasn't innocent in this by far. And she admitted, well, although she wasn't involved in this most recent bout of torture, she had viciously beat Dari herself on occasions, and it was written down. Oh, God. So she's also then arrested, literally as she was walking out the door, okay? So on Monday, the 7th of April, 2008, 2 days after her second birthday, 2 days after her second birthday, Darisabel Baez died at the hospital. 9:28 p.m. Oh, it's just awful. It's just so sad. So sad. So 1st degree murder was added to the charges for Harvey. She's obviously charged with endangerment of a child. I think he got a $200,000 bail. She got $100,000 bail. So neither one of them got out. No one posted bail for them. Okay. And then the autopsy came in. All right. Now, the manner of death, of course, was ruled as a homicide. But the cause of death was multiple traumatic injuries. Okay. And the reason it was said in that way is because they found 220 external injury sites. She was 2. Just 150 of those were new within the last 24 hours. So she had trauma of her right ear, where it was shown that it was from fingernails being dug into her ear. Her hair had been ripped out. If you remember, I said that the clumps of hair around the apartment. She had a bald patch on the right side of her head, and the rest of her hair was very, very thin. Her right shoulder had the whip injuries from the cord from the Xbox. She had a swollen entire left arm. Her face was beaten with her own hiking boot. The boot that I mentioned had blood on it. Blunt force trauma to her feet and her legs. Swelling to her brain from the multiple beatings. Retinal hemorrhages. So her eyes. Damage to her spinal cord. She had black tips of her fingers and missing fingernails. And when I mentioned she had damage to her genitals, it was because someone had been pinching her genitals. Someone had been pinching her. So there was trauma internally to her heart, her right lung, her pancreas. And these were all from high velocity impacts to her chest and her stomach. And the pathologist said, from what he could tell, it would appear she was struck at speeds up to 20 miles an hour. Meaning that whipping was coming down so fast. It was at speeds of the equivalent of 20 miles an hour. And to inflict the damage that had been done to this child over that 24-hour period, especially in the time frame that they were given when he brought her into the bedroom, when the pathologist tried to add it all up for the amount of injuries she had on her, he says that torture and beating that she'd taken in that bedroom. He's got it worked out conservatively. This is a conservative amount of 45 to 60 minutes she was in that bedroom with him. 60, he said 60 minutes was conservative. Oh, he says it was the worst a case of child abuse he'd ever seen. Now, there's a forensic nurse called Patty O'Brien. Now, you hear worst case of child abuse you've ever seen. They mention this in the documentary. They always say, you know, that gets said a lot. The officer in the documentary says, you know, sometimes you do become a bit more desensitized even to that term. He says, but when Patty O'Brien, the forensic nurse, says to him, this is the worst case of child abuse I have ever seen, he knew just how bad it was then. Now, she's in the documentary as well. You can see there's so many of them that you can see are so close to crying talking about this little girl. And Patty O'Brien was one of them. And she says he completely slaughtered her. That was what the term she used. And what she'd done, she made up, you know, I saw it with Gabriel Fernandez, where you get the diagram and injuries are placed on a diagram. She ran out of space on the diagram, and when you see the diagram, oh, it's horrific. It's awful. I mean, you can even see where her little black eyes would be on the diagram. It's just absolutely awful. And she says she didn't actually realise she had so much hair originally. It was her who'd said it. She didn't realise that she'd had a full head of hair until she saw a picture of her alive. She said, because this little girl, you know, she had hardly any. And she didn't realise she'd had a full head of healthy hair. So on Saturday the 12th of April was Dari's funeral. Okay. Now the first responders that I've mentioned in this story all went to this little girl's funeral. And I believe it was, it was either Roger or Andy that had actually said, I forgot to mention, had actually said when Dari was in the hospital, he'd actually said, if she makes it through, I'm adopting this child. So they'd really got that they'd all been affected very deeply with little Dari's death. And they all went to her funeral. Okay, there was obviously friends and family as well in the community, but they all went too. And on a little headstone, it says, "Sing to you my rainbow." And it's a picture of Dari with a deer, with an actual deer. And she's very cute. She's a very cute little girl. It's just so sad that this is on a headstone. Now, while she was in prison waiting for her trial, Noida attempted suicide, but she was stopped. I don't know if that was a good thing or a bad thing. I'm glad. Well, I don't know how I feel about it, but she was stopped in her cell, okay? But in October of 2009, Noida pled guilty to third-degree homicide. All right? You're about third-degree homicide, and also she would testify against Harvey, all right? A sentence was supposed to be 5 to 10 years, which is horrific. For an American case as well, I was really shocked. But she was out after 4 years. She got out in 2013. And she goes by Elizabeth now, her middle name that I'd mentioned. And it says she's gone on to have a baby boy since. I think it's best if I just don't say a lot about that. On the 9th of November 2009 was the trial for Harvey, okay? Now, this absolute coward comes into court, sits at the table and puts tissue in his ears, then puts his fingers in his ears and puts his head on the table so he hasn't got to see or hear any of the evidence relating to the child he tortured and beat to death. And in fact, on one of the days when he was aware that they were going to be showing the pictures of little Dari and what he'd done to her, he actually requested that he didn't have to appear in court that day. And luckily the judge was like, no, you will come into court. But you can make him come in, but you can't force him to watch. So again, on that day, fingers in ears, head down, so he didn't have to see the damage he'd done to this child. Utter coward. Now, on the 13th of December 2009, it took the jury 2 hours. That's all it took them to find this man guilty. That's all it took. Okay? Now, the prosecutor was going for the death sentence, so Harvey's mum and his sister came to sort of make excuses on the stand for him, basically, as to why he shouldn't get the death penalty. Okay? Now, I'm going to say I can be empathetic towards, I don't know if the word's empathetic, sympathetic, I'm never too sure which one to use, but I can be one of them to the child that Harvey was. Because his mum, although she was clean up to 15 years before the trial, she was a crack addict when he was growing up. And she admitted she would beat him severely with lots of different things. She beat him with cords, sticks, belts, and iron. You know, he didn't have it easy. He'd said that she spent her whole welfare check just before Christmas the one year. And rather than have to face her children that she'd spent all the money and couldn't buy them anything for Christmas, she locked them in their bedroom for 2 days so she could bypass Christmas and they wouldn't be looking at her for Christmas dinner or any gifts. So he had an awful upbringing by the sounds of it. There's no two, I could possibly have done a story on him. There's no two ways about that. It sounds horrific. But I will feel sympathy for the child he was. But for the man he is, absolutely not. There's no excuse whatsoever. None. We come across this all the time. And I will not excuse the people who went through it when they were younger as an excuse for inflicting it on a child once you're an adult. That makes no sense to me whatsoever. And I can't sympathise with that. I'm not a psychologist. I don't know what all of that behind it is. But they'll never get any sympathy from me for that. So when the jury went away to see what his sentence would be, it only took them an hour. And they came back with the death penalty. He was given a death sentence. Which, the only thing I'm disappointed about is the fact that Nida only got 4 years. That's what's got me on this case. Now, he's still alive. He was appealing right up until 2021. But I have seen on something that Pennsylvania, obviously he's in Philadelphia, but the state of Pennsylvania hasn't had a death sentence. Is it a death sentence, death penalty? It hasn't gone through since 1999. So, who knows if it'll actually happen with him. But he'll never get out, and I hope he sits on tenterhooks every single day. But to be honest, the amount of money he's costing the American taxpayer to keep him going, you know, every day for the rest of his life, just get it done. Just get it done. But I know that might sound heartless, but I don't care. Just everything that was done to this poor little girl when he was only in her life. He was in her life less than 6 months. I mean, what? how can you destroy it? I mean, we know it can happen even quicker than that. I know that. But it's just, it's crazy to me. He didn't even know her. And within 5 months of being in her life, he's killed her. And the so-called mother was there to back it all up. Ugh. That was the horrific Darisabel Baez story. Oh, God, it's just so sad. Just absolutely awful. If you do want to watch the documentary I was talking about, it's called Carrying Darisabel. Okay. It's only about half an hour long, but it is from the authorities' point of view, and it's very sad. They can obviously say it a lot better than I can. You know, it's just when I saw it from that side, I suppose it just, you forget the effect it would have on paramedics and police and everything else, and what they have to see on a daily basis. It just brought it home a little bit for me. But yeah, like I say, that was the horrific Darisabel Baez story. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm here every Tuesday and Thursday at 8 p.m. if you'd like to join me. Or if you'd like to subscribe, that would be amazing too. But thank you again, and I'll see you next week. Thank you. Take care.